You're on air with Jaimee, the place for industry leaders ready to scale to 7 figures and beyond. Today's show is brought to you by The Shift, my one-on-one intensive session to completely shift the trajectory of your business in just 7 days. Today's episode is inspired by my journal prompt from this morning. Not journal prompt. When I journal, I literally just sit down and it's like automatic writing. So the most crazy things come up, as you have heard from past episodes. But today, what I found really interesting was that the very thing that I journaled on actually came up in a mastermind call an hour later. And so I took it as a sign that it's something that we really need to bring light to this conversation, something that we need to speak about in depth, because it's not just me dealing with this. It is also someone else in my mastermind. And I know that that means that potentially you listening to this are also in this very sneaky, unconscious sabotaging pattern, and you don't even know it. So let me share what came up in my journal today. This was actually just a really small piece. You've unconsciously made things more complicated than they need to be. And it's okay. Hit the reset button and simplify. Simplifying is your focus. Ask yourself, how can you simplify? Often when it comes to business and manifestation, I should say, manifestation for business, quantum for business, we get told that the how is none of your business and that you surrender the how to the universe and that the universe will take care of the how. While I believe that you shouldn't get caught up in how something is going to make its way into your reality or how something is physically going to manifest, I actually believe that the most powerful question you can ask yourself is how. How can you simplify things? See, here's the pattern that I am seeing pop up in myself, in people around me, and in women literally all over the internet. We have this unconscious need, this unconscious pattern of making things so much more complicated than they actually are. Now, where this stems from is, I don't know about you, but when I grew up, I was told so many times, life isn't easy. Life isn't meant to be easy. Like, this is just life and it's not easy, right? Can you relate to that? Have you been told a story like that or something similar? This becomes conditioned in us to think that every time something is easy or something is simple, it's not right. It's not the right way forward because things shouldn't be easy. Things shouldn't be simple. And we have this unconscious need to literally make mountains out of molehills, right? And I think that some of this also stems back to our primal instincts and the caveman days where life was more complicated and life wasn't easy. And they almost had to make mountains out of molehills because the whole, like the instincts were all about survival. You know, they were faced with danger every single day. And so it's almost like back in those days, they had to make things more complicated in order to keep themselves safe. It was like this extra wall of protection, right? But now I see this seeping into our everyday, and we're not in danger. You know, most of us are so fucking blessed with what we have in our life. We are not faced with danger every single day. And so this need to overcomplicate things, this need to make things fucking harder than they actually need to be, we need to let go of it because it's actually keeping us stuck. You know, it's keeping you so paralyzed in where you are that you're not actually making moves. You're not building that momentum. And I don't care what anyone says. You cannot build a business by not being in momentum, by not making moves. I and I rant about this all the time, but I see on TikTok particularly people talking about the law of assumption and how you don't have to take action because the law of assumption just means that everything will come to you. And I'm telling you right now, it's fucking bullshit, because at some point, in order to manifest a sale in your business, you have to have an offer out there. In order to manifest a sale in your business, you have to have a platform. You have to have a way that people can pay you. You have to, be known, right? At some point, there is some level of action that needs to be made. It just doesn't have to be as complicated as we have told ourselves that it needs to be. I really do believe that business gets to be simple. The actual concept of business is so much easier and so much more simple than so many people make it out to be, right? You are an expert in some field. You have knowledge that other people don't have. And so you package that knowledge and you sell it. That is business. You package the service that you're an expert in and you sell it. That is business. It doesn't need to be any more complicated than that. And yet, what we do is we add layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of things that we believe we need to do in order to reach our goal, in order to reach the sale, in order to have that next level of success that we desire. And the truth is that there are no layers aside from package your brilliance and fucking sell it, right? Yes, you need to be visible and creating content and doing those little things, but we don't need to keep adding the layers on and making it complicated. Here's a way that I see this really playing out. And this is something else that it's a huge sabotage pattern, and it's so rife in the personal development industry. I see people who overcomplicate things to such a degree that they are riddled with self-doubt and limiting beliefs and these BS stories and conditioning already upon this that we're talking about. And then what happens is they convince themselves that in order to move forward, they first have to resolve all of these beliefs and limitations and stories and things, instead of just choosing to accept that they're there and take action through them, instead of just choosing to unplug from that and take action despite it. And so what happens is they get so caught up in this journey of needing to heal or fix or like even fucking rewire and reprogram themselves that they don't take the action. And the longer that you sit in inaction, the harder it is to get back in momentum. The longer that you allow yourself to sit in this state of paralysis, of not knowing the move forward because it all just feels so hard and so complicated in your head, the harder it is to take the first step. Momentum builds momentum. The first step builds the momentum. You have to be able to make the moves in order to build that consistency and that flow, which leads to everything that we desire to have in business. So I invite you to really think, like, how are you overcomplicating things? What stories have you set up in your mind that have led to this pure level of analysis paralysis and feeling like things are so much harder than they need to be? Like, this even comes down to content. And wildly, and this is actually where I have found myself massively overcomplicating everything. I've recently made like the slightest pivot. You barely have probably even noticed. But in my mind, it feels huge, right? I'm just talking to a different person. I've tweaked my ideal dream client avatar and I'm literally just speaking to a different person. A person who is more aligned with me and with the direction that I desire to take my business. That's literally it. It's so simple. And yet in my mind, I made this a pivot. I literally called it a pivot. There's a post on my Instagram. I called it a pivot. It's not a pivot. It's actually just a very slight sharpening of where my business is going. But what happens is, in our mind, unconsciously, subconsciously, we want to call these little tweaks pivots. And the minute that you think that you've pivoted your business, all of a sudden everything's so much more complicated. all of a sudden it feels like everything needs to change, because you tweaked that one little thing, everything else needs to change. But more than often, it actually doesn't. And so content has never been an issue for me. Like, I have created so much content in my years on the internet. I genuinely love creating content. I get downloads all the time. I am always inspired for something, whether it's relevant to my business or not. I could, if I wasn't building a business and I was literally just a content creator, I feel like I would never run out of things because my whole life can be content, right? But since I decided that I was labeling this, very small tweak in my business a pivot, I have become paralyzed by what I should be speaking about online. And this comes from, again, overcomplicating it. In the past, I used to really feed into this story that I didn't yet know enough. I had so much imposter syndrome. I didn't know enough. Who was I to talk about that? All of this stuff, right? Now I'm at this different level of I know so fucking much. I don't even know where to start. Like, there is so much that I could sit down and talk about. I could rant for hours on these podcast episodes and literally just verbally vomit on you all of the things that I know about the superconscious and about quantum and how that's relevant to business and why this is so often the missing key to people's success. That's why I've built this whole entire business. But when it came to actually sitting down and creating pieces of content, I was like, fuck, I just don't even know where to start. I don't even know where to start. I don't even know what to post now because it was so overcomplicated. Because instead of just being like, well, what's one thing that you think someone needs to hear? What's one problem that they're faced with? What's one piece of information that you know about quantum that could help someone, have a little mini win in their business? Instead of all of those simple things, I've literally made content out to be this humongous big thing that it doesn't need to be. This podcast is the perfect example of how I did this in the past. I now record the podcast, if you didn't know, as an audio, but also on YouTube. And in the past, I had so much resistance to doing that because I was like, no, that's not honoring YouTube for what YouTube needs to be. You don't see people do that on YouTube. YouTube is for sit down and to the camera and like really aesthetic videos and B-roll and all of that, right? I way overcomplicated the process, which led to me desiring to be on YouTube. Like, I've always seen myself as being a YouTuber, but rarely posting videos because they were so fucking complicated to make. Now I'm like, well, I'm already recording a podcast. I might as well record the video for it and post that to YouTube. And if at some point down the path, I decide that, no, I want to record some other videos for YouTube, cool, I'll do it. But it does not need to be any more complicated than that. We need to start removing the barriers that we have put up that are keeping us from where we desire to be. That's right. These like little layers of complication that you've put on things are actually barriers to you stepping forward. It's unconsciously a way that you are keeping yourself in your comfort zone by making things so much more complicated. Like, is that not wild? Our brains honestly blow my brain. The ways that we tell ourselves that we're not good enough or keep ourselves safe or keep ourselves in our comfort zone are just fucking infinite. And if you're not aware and you're not like hyper self-aware and able to see these patterns, this is how you just get stuck and never actually make progress towards where you desire to be. Or how you make progress because, you're listening to this, you're super successful already, but how you've potentially not moved beyond where you are now because you've made things so much more complicated. You feel like in order to reach that next level, things have to be even harder than they were to get to where you are. But it's just not the truth. I actually see all the time in business people saying that first 6 figures, that first 12 months, 2 years, that first 10K followers, whatever it is the fucking hardest because it's all new. It's all new, and you are faced up against yourself time and time and time again, and you have to deal with so much more shit in that first period of business. But once you can get through that, it actually gets easier. It actually gets easier because you already know all the base, right? This next period, this next up level that you are going through requires you to be more self-aware than you ever have been, to spy these little sabotaging patterns that are keeping you small, to stop them and make the change. Because it's all well and good to notice that you're doing these things. It's all well and good to be like, oh, wow, Jaimee, thank you. You've opened my eyes. I was so unconsciously sabotaging myself by making things more complicated. And then you just continue on your merry way of making things more complicated and adding the layers and adding the barriers. No, we are removing the barriers. The whole takeaway of this episode is I want you to be thinking, how can I simplify this? How can I remove the barriers that exist between where I am now and where I need to be? How can I make it easier for me to take those steps, to sell every day, to create that next level of content, to, get myself in front of more people, whatever it looks like for you in your business, where it's at? What are the things that you can remove that are keeping you stuck where you are now? Now, often, even in the most self-aware women, we still can't see these blind spots. And that is obviously where having a coach or a mentor is so powerful, because you can sit down and be like, hey, everything feels really hard at the moment. And I know that it shouldn't. I know that things shouldn't always feel hard. Like, absolutely, yes, we're humans. Like, let's just address this here and there right now. We are humans. We're here having a human experience. Humans experience polarity. That means good and bad, highs and lows. That is all normal. That is a normal experience being a human. You will have times where things do just naturally feel harder or more intense than they are. But the core feeling should be like, yeah, okay, this feels a little bit difficult. This is a difficult period, but I know that the actions I need to take are simple and easy. I know that I can just do them. I know that I can remove that resistance and do it, right? So this isn't about like being, I'm not into toxic positivity. This isn't about being high vibe and like just go, go, go all the time. It's not about that. What it is about is recognizing where you're overcomplicating things and simplify them. And this is another reason why I have created my one-on-one shift session, because in that, not only do we reconnect to your vision and really step out what that looks like to bring it into reality, but we're going to notice any resistance that comes up. And what I see is these patterns arise when we start discussing like the next steps forward to bring you closer to your vision, because everything I do is grounded in action. We don't just sit and like map out a vision and it's beautiful and I reprogram your mind and everything's merry. There is action required. Every single session of mine is grounded in action, and we actually talk about that in the session. We look at the resistance that's coming up. We look at how you might be complicating it. We look at what is in the way for you taking that next step. And then we're able to reprogram and recode it on that call. So if you are feeling stuck and you are feeling like, this is where you're at, you've overcomplicated things to the point where you can't even take that next step forward, or you don't even know what that next step forward is, use the link in the show notes, book a session with me. These sessions are honestly so amazing. I know I talk about it all the time, but the shifts and the changes that I see from literally just one session is absolutely insane. And it's just bringing things to the surface so that we can reprogram them, recode them, remove that resistance, and get you back in action, get you back in momentum, get you back taking those steps forward to literally the desires that you have, right? I have also added into this 7 days of Voxer access to really help to integrate everything, because what I find is that after a session, obviously you have things that, will come up afterwards that need a little bit of assistance integrating, and then also a follow-up recode after 7 days to remove any last bits of resistance, to literally have you set up to just go forward, right? Link is in the show notes. Please book a session with me and let's get you moving. Let's get you out of these sabotage patterns and let's get you into the power that you are here to share with the world.